What happens if someone doesn't consent to that recording thing? Do they get kicked out?
No, it just stays there forever.
No, it actually disconnects you, I think. If you
Oh,
say
no. If you click the button, okay. If you just leave it up and don't
Just
say
leave the
anything, it
box?
just stays there
Stays.
forever.
But it still records you.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome everyone. We are already streaming, so welcome everyone to this weekly IPLD team meeting. It's January the 27th, 2020. As every week, we go through the stuff that we have worked on in the past week and plan to work on, and then discuss any open items we might have. So this time I was early, and I'm the first one on the list. So this week I actually have done something IPLD related, which is great. So first of all, I worked on Rust multi-hash. There is a fork of Rust multi-hash for libp2p, and they moved forward a bit, and now I'm finally merged all the major changes they did on their version into the normal crate that is stored, basically that is part of GitHub multi-formats organization. There's still one small change that needs to move, but I want to refactor it somehow. But anyway, the major changes are in. So the next step is to make the libp2p team move over to this other crate and basically, oh my God, I'm missing words. Abandon the old one. Deprecating was the word I was looking for. And then I've also spent time on actual IPLD. So the Rust IPLD, I created a repository called Rust IPLD on my own GitHub repository. I leave it there for now because it's really meant as a starting point. So because I want then discuss with other people doing other implementations on how to move forward, and just basically not saying this is the only way of doing it, and then and basically disregarding the work they have done already. But this is just to start the discussion, and then we'll see how this goes. And what it currently does is it has the data model defined, and it can encode and decode the CBOR, which was a pain to implement because of SERDE. And I propose that for future codecs, we don't use SERDE, but we serialize and deserialize them directly. But there's also more about it in the issue that I've linked in the notes. That's all I have. Next one on my list is Eric.
Oh, hello. So I had an exciting week. I got benchmarks. It's my favorite thing because I have numbers to make me feel good and actually confident in what I'm doing for once. So I've been on this big long refactor around interfaces in the core of Go IPLD Prime for quite a while. The vision behind all this was this whole time, but it would make it easier to build large data structures faster, because this pivot to the interfaces would let you allocate a bunch of stuff up front and then fill it in, and this should be faster for reasons. I've been going purely on faith on that for a really long time, and this week I finally got the benchmarks. So long story short, everything works. The whole assembler system means building maps is at least twice as fast as the old ones were for the untyped basic map implementation that a lot of the code is using so far. Iterating things is basically infinitely faster. There used to be an allocation basically per step in iterating over map keys, and now there is none. So that's in practice at least 10 times faster. It's faster yet on larger things because the garbage collector, it adds up. So that's really cool, and there's benchmarks to confirm it. So it's yes. Iterating the new maps is so fast, it's actually faster than iterating Golang maps, which seems really weird. But it does check out because we are doing a little more upfront work in order to enable that. Our builds are slower than inserting into a Golang native map. And we're also not actively randomizing things when ranging over it, which Golang does do for interesting reasons. So anyway, this is good. It's going fast, and the TLDR is this confirms that whole design direction. So now I get to just move forward all the more confidently with that. The next thing I'm doing is kicking around some irritating issues in the details of structs and how many types I have to generate to make fields do the right thing. And I have engineered tiers about optimizing other things, but they're basically tiny compared to the things that are already confirmed to work. So I won't talk about them. And we've had lots of things about specs to discuss in the last week and probably will the next week, but I'll probably let somebody else talk about that. So Finn for me.
Thank you. So next on my list is Rod.
Yep, and I'm just realized I probably should get links. So been head in CBOR and DAG CBOR. There's an interesting thread if anyone listening wants to follow up on it in issue number, where is it? Issue number 227 in the specs repo, which has been collecting a bunch of random things about DAG CBOR and things about strictness in encoding and decoding. And that became a pull request in number 236 to the specs repo to see if we can tighten up DAG CBOR, the spec for it, so that there's ideally, we're aiming for there only being one way to encode a given data structure into CBOR, and that any round trip out and then back again would be stable, and that this can be implemented in the different languages we care about, and hopefully more. And we've got some. We already have some holes at the moment where there's ways to encode things differently, and the strictness is not there. So DAG CBOR will accept data structures that have been encoded in very loose ways. The most interesting discrepancy between JavaScript and Go at the moment is the encoding of floats, where JavaScript will do small as possible, and Go does 64 bits for all floats. So we're discussing harmonizing that in some way, but it needs to be deterministic for both of them. And there's a few other interesting things that are cropping up there. So that's that. I've been doing a little bit more Filecoin learning and a bit more CBOR JavaScript stuff, and thinking about how if we have a new CBOR parser in JavaScript, how to expose enough of it that we have the control that we want over validating an encoding, because we can't do that currently. So there's no way to say, hey, this thing was, this int was encoded in 64 bits, but it really only needed 8. This is not a valid DAG CBOR block, that kind of thing. If we want to do that, we can't at the moment. So yeah, that's basically me.
Someday we're going to take all this knowledge about formats and how to write parsers, and we're going to write our own new format. Yep. That's the best thing ever. It doesn't have any of these problems, and then everyone hates because it's not JSON. All right.
Yeah, so next one is Michael.
Yeah. So most of what I did last week was the reviews. The timelines got compressed a bit, so I had to really hustle to get everything ready. But it all went really well. Calibrations went well. It's all looking good. Also, Tim Caswell starts today working on some selector stuff, so that's great. There's an email with most of y'all on that to get him started, point him at all the right docs and all that kind of stuff. More on that as we move along. And just a reminder, he's only on part-time, so it's not like a full-time thing. Last week, I did get a chance to write some code. I wrote a little library on top of the new Unix Specificity 1 importer stuff that Alex had given me. This is just a library that matches really directly what we are doing in Lambda. and the kind of the data that we need to get out of Unix 51 in order to encode into the car files from Lambda for each of these files. So I don't know how useful it is independently, but it does have full test coverage because I very much did not want it to be wrong and have to go and update, you know, petabytes of data. That would have been painful. So I'm erring on the side of lots and lots of tests. I also have some more car format stuff to go over if we have time at the end, and we are at the end, so I guess I'll just get into it. I commented in the spec to this effect, but let's just sort of discuss a little bit in case there's like questions and details. At the end of meeting on Friday, I was able to sit down with Stephen and Juan. Oh, hey, Stephen's here. Ooh. He can tell me if I misrepresent anything that they said. Basically, the gist of it is we should land something really quickly that just describes what is there, what we've already been dealing with in terms of car files without any changes. So not having the CID v1 thing in there, for instance, just like leaving it as is, ship it, and then work on, then do a new spec that can add some of the things in that we need, that is a slight change to the format, but something that we can actually implement pretty quickly. So I don't want to dive into like seekability and all these like really hard problems, but there's stuff that we want to be able to put in there, like if you create the car file from a selector, we want to be able to put the selector into the car file next to the root CID. So that like that is like our signal that this is a deterministic car file at that point. And that is like what we would use to validate that it was deterministic, essentially. And so we can talk in the issue about the best way to encode those. In my view, like it should be the CID of the selector as a CBOR block. And then in order, the next blocks in the car file, the first ones should be those blocks. But we can discuss in the issue about whether or not that's the right way to go. I don't think that we should allow variants for inlining them because then that leads to a lack of determinism. And the whole point is to be deterministic. And also inlining, like requiring inlining means that we're going to have a lot of duplicate data. Because I think that like the most common thing is going to be get a whole graph, and that's always going to be the same selector. So if you put a bunch of different graphs into one, you're just going to have the same selector inlined like 8 times. Anything else? Stephen, did I miss anything? Stephen may not actually be paying attention to this call. Okay. Rod, you've been working on the car spec. Any questions or things left out?
No, it sounds reasonable. I mean, describing how it is now is good, but there's still some very rough edges around what that is. Like it's not, you know, the code doesn't describe a very tight spec. That's all. So we still have to make stuff up.
I think that where the current implementation is loose and we think that we may have encoded data loosely, we should just leave that loose in the spec and not try to clean it up, and then clean it up in the next version. Like when we make all these, like, you know, when we add these features to the spec, we can also lock things down. Like I do want to lock down the CID version thing. Like I would like it to be all CID one, things like that. But I also don't want somebody to read the spec and implement it and then get one of these old car files and go like, I don't even know what to do. My parser doesn't work anymore.
Okay, I'll have a look over what I've got in there now and see what I need to take out. I think there's probably just a few things to take out. But but I think we can, the first one we can land with how it is now and a bunch of notes about what needs to be attacked.
Right. Yep.
So it wouldn't be a big modification from what we have right now.
Yep. And I think that we should probably start the file format with a var int for the version now that we're versioning it. call the last one v0 and then move on.
Yeah. The version is in the CBOR block, which is a bit unfortunate. So I'm +1 on extracting that up to the top.
Yeah. And Stephen had a good point about that, which is that if we modify it so that the CBOR block is just like any other block and it starts with its CID, you could read just the CID out of it. And then if it's if you know that was deterministic because you had seen it before, you could then just literally do a byte match on in order to figure out if it's actually matching the one that you already looked at before. So, and just be cleaner. Cool.
Actually, Steven just said that his computer froze in the channel.
Oh no.
So I asked him if he's actually
got
coming
Linux.
back. So we have to repeat that or not.
Cool.
Oh, he can hear you, I guess.
Oh, okay. He can hear us. Okay. He just can't speak because Linux. Okay. Well, yeah. Just type it. Can you type in the chat? Or is it like fully frozen? Being that there's nothing in the chat, I'm going to think that it's fully frozen, and then he's probably on
Yeah,
Slack.
he actually keeps talking on Slack, so he says no.
Okay. Okay. Which Slack? Okay.
IPLD.
Cool. All right. There he is. I see it now. Okay, cool. All right. Awesome. We're good there. Anything else before we finish up the public call?
All right. Then we were pretty quick. That's cool. Yeah, then see you all next week.
Cool.
Goodbye.
I'm staying on for the.
Stop the recording.